What would you do if the person sitting across from you at dinner was everything you never knew you needed, and you were about to ruin it before the appetizers even arrived? Ethan Carter had built a $1 billion empire from nothing. He could buy entire city blocks, fly private anywhere on Earth, and never look at a price tag again. But he couldn't buy himself one honest conversation on a Saturday night. Lily Harper had nothing, except 2 kids who needed her, 2 jobs that were slowly breaking her, and just enough courage left to walk through that restaurant door. Neither of them expected what happened next. If you've ever been afraid to tell someone the truth about your life, stay until the end. Drop your city in the comments. Let me see how far this story travels. The reservation was for 7:30. Ethan showed up at 7:12. Not because he was eager. He wasn't. If anything, showing up 18 minutes early was a habit born from years of controlling every room he walked into before anyone else could set the temperature. Conference rooms, boardrooms, courtrooms. Once, when a former business partner tried to sue him for a deal that went sideways in 2019. Ethan Carter arrived first, always. It was the only way he knew how to feel even remotely safe in a situation he hadn't engineered himself. A blind date, though, that was a different animal entirely. He sat at the table near the window, the one he'd specifically requested when he called ahead, because it gave him a clear sightline to the entrance without putting him on display like some trophy in a glass case. He'd worn dark jeans and a charcoal gray sweater, not the designer stuff, the simple merino wool his assistant Margaret kept threatening to donate to charity because he wore it too often. He'd left the watch at home, the Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars. He didn't want to be that guy tonight. He was always that guy. He was tired of being that guy. The restaurant was called Carmine's on Wabash, one of those old-school Italian joints that had survived 3 recessions and the construction of 2 different condo towers on the same block. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, a handwritten specials board near the bar that someone had clearly spent 20 minutes on. The kind of place that didn't take itself too seriously, and Ethan liked that. He'd suggested it specifically. Most women he'd been set up with through the app expected Morton's or Alinea. One had literally sent him a Yelp link to a tasting menu restaurant before their first conversation had even hit 20 messages. He looked at the menu without reading it. Outside on Wabash Avenue, the October wind was doing its thing. That particular Chicago wind that didn't just blow, it committed. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk. A couple hurried past the window holding their coats closed with both hands. The city had that specific autumn feeling of something ending, of everything getting ready to go to sleep. Ethan's phone buzzed. He turned it face down without looking. He told Margaret, his assistant, his scheduler, his first line of defense against the chaos of running a company, that he was unavailable from 7 to 10. She'd stared at him for a full 3 seconds before writing it down, which was her version of screaming. Margaret had worked for him for 6 years. She could communicate entire paragraphs with the angle of her eyebrows. He picked up his water glass, set it back down, picked up his phone, put it in his pocket. The problem with blind dates, with any dates really, was that there was no data. No deck to review beforehand, no way to prepare. He could study a competitor's quarterly earnings in 40 minutes and find 3 weaknesses they didn't even know they had. He could walk into a negotiation knowing every person in the room's professional history, their pressure points, what they'd eaten for lunch. But sitting at a table in a restaurant waiting for a woman he'd exchanged maybe 30 messages with over 2 weeks, he had nothing. He pulled her profile up on his phone. Lily Harper, 30 years old, Chicago, Illinois. The photos showed a woman with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of strong coffee. Not the watered-down kind, the real stuff. She was smiling in every photo. Not the forced, camera-conscious smile he saw constantly at charity events and company parties. A real one. The kind that reached the corners of her eyes and made her whole face look like it was in on the joke. Her bio was 3 sentences. Most people wrote novels about themselves, their love of hiking and brunch and living authentically. Lily had written, "I work too much and sleep too little. I'm better in person than I am on paper, looking for someone honest." He'd swiped right in under 2 seconds. They'd matched. She'd messaged first, "So what do you actually do? Your profile says tech, which tells me literally nothing." He'd laughed out loud. Alone in his penthouse at 11:30 at night, sitting on a couch that cost $14,000, he'd laughed at a text message like a teenager. Fair, he'd typed back. I run a software company. It's less exciting than it sounds. Is it though? Because software company sounds deeply, profoundly unexciting. So you're saying it's even worse than that? He'd looked at the ceiling for a moment. We make logistics infrastructure tools for mid-market supply chains. Oh, good. I was afraid it might be boring. He'd messaged her every day after that. The restaurant's front door opened with a small bell, and a cold draft cut through the warm room. Ethan looked up. Later, if anyone asked him to describe the moment, he would struggle. Not because nothing happened, because too much happened in too short a time, and his brain, the same brain that could hold 50 variables of a contract negotiation simultaneously, short-circuited somewhere between the bell above the door and the moment Lily Harper looked around the restaurant and found his eyes across the room. She was wearing a burgundy coat that had seen better days. One of the buttons near the collar was slightly off, like she'd refastened it in a hurry. Her hair was down, pushed a little sideways by the wind. She was carrying a purse on her left shoulder and had her right hand pressed flat against her coat, like she was trying to physically calm herself down. She was nervous. That was the first thing he clocked. Not because it made him feel superior, it was the opposite. Seeing that she was nervous made something in his chest do something complicated. She spotted him. He raised one hand, half a wave, nothing dramatic, and she smiled. The same smile from the photos, the one that reached her eyes. And he felt the specific anxiety of the past 18 minutes evaporate like morning fog. She walked toward him and he stood because his mother had been very clear about certain things, even if she wasn't around anymore to enforce them. Ethan? That's me. He pulled out the chair across from him. She paused for half a second. He couldn't tell if she was surprised or touched, and sat down. Sorry, I think I'm like 2 minutes late, she said, unwrapping her scarf. The red line was doing that thing where it just stops in a tunnel and doesn't explain itself. The red line does that constantly. Every time. You'd think I'd account for it by now. She finally got the scarf off and draped it over the back of her chair. I have been taking the red line for 8 years. 8 years of optimism. She laughed. A real laugh, short and genuine. And the last of his tension walked out the door. I'm Lily, she said, like he might have forgotten. I know. He sat back down. You look like your photos. Is that a compliment or a low bar? Definitely a compliment. Half the people on that app look like their photos the way a movie poster looks like the actual movie. She tilted her head. That's weirdly specific. I've been on 3 of these. 3 total? She sounded genuinely surprised. You're on a dating app and you've only been on 3 dates? 4, counting tonight. Okay, but how long have you been on the app? He hesitated. 11 months. Her eyes widened slightly. Ethan, that's like a date every 3 months. I've been busy. Everyone's busy. I've been very busy. She studied him for a moment, not unkindly. Okay, I believe you. You have the face of someone who is very busy. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he decided to take it as a compliment. The waiter appeared, a young guy named Danny, according to his name tag, who ran through the specials with the practice speed of someone who'd delivered this monologue 600 times. Neither of them opened their menus. Danny left. They didn't notice. Can I ask you something? Lily said. Yeah. Why did you actually get on the app, like the real reason? She rested her chin in her hand, elbow on the table. Not the answer you'd give if someone asked at a dinner party. Ethan picked up his water glass. Bought himself 2 seconds. The dinner party answer was something like, I've been so focused on work for so long, I figured it was time to put myself out there. Smooth, acceptable, revealing nothing. My daughter, he said instead. She's 7. She asked me last Christmas who I was going to kiss at midnight on New Year's Eve. He set the glass down. And I didn't have an answer. Lily was quiet for a moment. What did you tell her? I told her I'd probably just kiss her on the forehead. And? She told me that didn't count. He smiled at the tablecloth. She's 7, and she already knows the rules better than I do. Lily smiled too, but there was something softer in it now. How long have you been doing it alone? 4 years. Her mom passed when Sophie was 3. I'm sorry. He stopped. The reflexive, I'm fine, It was a long time ago, was right there, ready to go. He'd said it so many times it had its own muscle memory. It's still hard sometimes, in ways I don't always expect. She nodded slowly. She didn't rush to fill the silence with something comforting or redirect to a lighter topic, the way most people did. She just let it sit there. He found himself grateful for that. "What about you?" he asked. "Why the app?" "My friend Lauren signed me up," she said. "She did it while I was in the bathroom at her apartment and then announced it when I came back. I almost deleted it 17 times. "Why didn't you?" She thought about it. "Because I'm 30 years old and I'm tired of being terrified of everything." He looked at her. "You don't seem terrified." "I'm excellent at not seeming things." "What are you terrified of right now?" She met his eyes. "That this is going really well and something's about to ruin it." He held her gaze. "What would ruin it?" She almost said something. He could see it, the sentence gathering behind her eyes, getting organized. But then she picked up her menu instead, and he let her have that. "Let's order first," she said. They ordered. Lily got the eggplant parmesan. Ethan ordered the chicken piccata and then second-guessed himself, and the waiter had to come back. "You don't know what you want?" Lily said, amused. "I know what I want. I keep changing it." "Those are the same thing." "They're really not." She pointed at him with her bread. "You strike me as someone who spends a lot of time in their own head." "Is that bad?" "No," she said. "Just something I noticed." "What else did you notice?" She broke the bread in half, considered him. "You looked up from your phone when I walked in. Most people are looking at their phones when the other person arrives. You were just sitting there." "I put it in my pocket." "Why?" "Because it seemed like the right thing to do." She looked at him for a moment. "See, that's the thing," she said quietly. "It seems obvious when you say it, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that." The restaurant had filled up around them. Families in the back, a group of friends near the bar celebrating something loud and joyful, two older men arguing over a sports score by the window. The candle between Ethan and Lily threw soft light across the table, and the wine was good, and the bread was warm, and for a long stretch of time they just talked. She told him about her job at the dental office, front desk, insurance claims, the particular misery of explaining deductibles to people who were already having a bad day because someone was about to drill into their teeth. She told him about the second job, picking up weekend shifts at a hotel catering banquet events, setting tables, breaking them down, carrying things that were too heavy and pretending they weren't. He listened. He didn't offer advice, didn't suggest solutions, didn't look at her the way some people looked at her when she described her life, that flicker of something uncomfortable, like they couldn't quite figure out where to put the information. He just listened. "It sounds exhausting," he said. "It is." She said it without embarrassment. "But it's fine. It's what's needed right now." "What's needed for what?" She paused, picked up her wine glass, put it back down. "For my kids." The word landed on the table between them like a stone dropped in still water. Ethan waited. Lily watched his face. He could feel her watching, reading him the way people read situations when they've been burned before and learned to look for the fire before they could smell the smoke. "I have 2, she said. "Marcus is 8. Emma is 5. She held herself very still, like she'd stepped out onto ice and was waiting to hear if it would crack. Ethan set down his fork. He did it slowly, the way you set something down when you want to make sure you don't make any sudden movements. Not because he needed to think about what to say, but because he could see what was happening. He could see the preparation behind her eyes, the practiced calm of someone getting ready to absorb a blow they'd already taken before. She was expecting him to leave, not physically, not right this second, but she was expecting the shift, the slight cooling of the air between them, the way men found reasons to wrap things up early, made vague noises about being in touch, then went quiet. He'd met women who'd done the same thing with Sophie, who'd smiled too wide when he mentioned he had a daughter and then found reasons not to schedule a second date. He understood, in a way he hadn't expected, exactly what this moment cost her. "How old did you say?" he asked. She blinked. 8 and 5. "What are their names?" She looked at him like the question didn't make sense. "Marcus and Emma." "Marcus." He repeated it like he was filing it away. "Is he the one who told you to make sure the next guy is nice?" Her lips parted slightly. How did you... You mentioned it. In the chat. 3 weeks ago. He picked up his fork again. You said he told you that, and you thought it was the saddest and funniest thing you'd ever heard. Lily stared at him. Marcus, she repeated softly, like the name sounded different coming back to her. Yeah. He speared a piece of chicken. He sounds like a practical kid. He is. Her voice had changed. There was something unsteady in it now. Not sadness exactly, but something adjacent to it. The thing that happens when you brace for impact, and the impact doesn't come. He really is. 5-year-old Emma. Does she have strong opinions yet, or is that coming? Lily let out a breath that was halfway to a laugh. She's been a strong opinion since conception. We are fully in the era of Emma opinions. Sophie's the same way. She told me last week that I was putting her barrettes in wrong. She was very calm about it, worse than if she'd yelled. The calm disappointment, Lily said, devastating. Completely. They looked at each other across the table. You didn't... She stopped. Didn't what? Nothing. You can say it. She pressed her lips together, looked at the tablecloth for a moment. You didn't flinch. He let that sit for a second. Was I supposed to? Most people do. Most people are idiots. She laughed. A real one, surprised out of her, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth to catch it. Ethan, I'm serious. He leaned back in his chair. You're sitting across from me after working 2 jobs all week. You came here on the red line in this. He glanced at the coat draped over her chair. That wind is brutal tonight, and you're nervous about telling me the most honest thing about yourself. That's not a red flag. That's just your life. She was quiet for a moment. You make it sound simple, she said. It is simple. He paused. The feeling of it isn't, but the thing itself is simple. Outside the window, a city bus rumbled past. The candle flickered. By 9:15, the dinner plates had been cleared, and Danny had stopped by twice to offer dessert with the patient persistence of someone working toward a tip. They ordered tiramisu to share, not because either of them was particularly hungry anymore, but because neither of them wanted to ask for the check. Asking for the check meant deciding if the night was over, and neither of them was ready to make that decision. Lily was on her second glass of wine. Ethan was still on his first. Tell me about your company, she said. Not the boring version, the real version. The boring version is the real version. Then why did you build it? He turned the stem of his wine glass between his fingers. When I was 24, I was working for a logistics company in Ohio. Mid-size company. Maybe 200 employees. And every single day we were losing money in ways no one could track. Somewhere between the warehouse and the delivery and the invoicing. Things just... He made a gesture with his hand. Fell into holes. So you fixed it. I saw where the holes were. I built something that patched them. He shrugged. First company. Sold it when I was 27 for more than I had any right to get. Built the second one. Sold that one too. Third one I kept. Why'd you keep the third? Because Sophie was born, and I finally understood that some things aren't worth selling. She rested her chin in her hand again. You're different than I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. She looked at him honestly. Someone who talks about themselves more. I talk about myself constantly. I just do it in quarterly reports. She smiled. Very personal. I get extremely vulnerable in the footnotes. The tiramisu arrived. They ate it slowly and talked about Chicago, about the specific personality of different neighborhoods, about which park was worth the bus ride and which wasn't, about the year they'd both separately gone to the same fireworks display on the lakefront and had both come home early because the crowds were too much. The coincidence made Lily shake her head. How is that possible, she said. It's a big city and we're both introverts. You're an introvert? You run a company. Introvert who learned to perform. It's a skill. She studied him. Yeah, okay. I see that. What does that mean? It means I've been trying to figure out what's underneath the... She waved her hand at him vaguely. The very collected thing you have going on, and I think I just got a piece of it. And? And nothing. It's just interesting. Interesting good or interesting cautionary? She smiled slowly. Ask me again at the end of the night. They stayed until 10:40. Danny, to his credit, had given up on subtlety around the 45-minute mark, and just left the check in the middle of the table without announcing it. Ethan settled it without looking at the total. Outside, the October cold hit them immediately. Lily pulled her coat tighter. The streets were quieter now. The dinner crowd had thinned, and what was left was the late-night scatter of cabs and dog walkers and couples moving quickly against the wind. "Where are you parked?" he asked. 2 blocks, on Michigan." "I'll walk with you." She glanced at him sideways. "You don't have to." "I want to." They walked. The wind made conversation difficult, so for half a block they just moved side by side in the specific, comfortable silence of two people who had just spent 3 hours talking and didn't need to fill every space. Ethan noticed that she walked fast. Not anxiously, just efficiently, like someone who had learned to cover ground quickly. They reached her car. A 2015 Honda Civic, silver, with a long scratch along the rear panel that had been there long enough to rust at the edges. There was a stick-figure family on the back window. 2 kids, 1 adult, and a faded parking permit for a lot he didn't recognize. She pulled out her keys, then stopped, turned to him. In the wash of the streetlight, he could see something working in her expression, the thing she'd been holding back, or not all the way back, all evening. "I want to say something," she said. "Okay. I don't usually... I've gotten pretty good at not getting my hopes up, about anything." She was looking at him steadily. "And I came tonight ready to be disappointed, because that's just..." She exhaled. "That's just what I do now. It's like a reflex." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." She glanced at the ground, then back up at him. "You were not disappointing." The way she said it was so plainly, carefully honest, stripped of performance, without the arch delivery that would have made it cute rather than real, that it hit him somewhere he hadn't expected. "For what it's worth," he said, "I drove here thinking I'd be home by 9. And? And it's almost 11. She looked at him. "That's the best thing anyone said to me in a long time. That's a low bar." "It is," she agreed, "but you cleared it easily, so." He laughed. Not a polished laugh, a real one. She was smiling at him, and the wind was pushing her hair across her face, and she reached up to brush it back with her fingers. And in that specific, unstyled, imperfect moment, she looked more real than anyone he'd met in years. "Marcus," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You told me he asked you to make sure the next man is nice." He held her gaze. "I can be nice." She was quiet, not the silence of someone with nothing to say. The silence of someone processing something that hadn't gone the way they'd steeled themselves for. "I know," she said softly. "I think you actually can." The wind gusted. A cab rolled through the intersection. "Can I call you tomorrow?" he asked. She looked at him for one more moment, reading him the way she'd been reading him all night, looking for the thing that would eventually surface. The flinch, the hesitation, the footnote that changed the meaning of everything before it. "Yeah," she said. "You can call me tomorrow." She got in her car. He stepped back. She started the engine, and the headlights came on, and she looked through the windshield at him for just a second before she pulled out. He watched her turn onto Michigan Avenue and disappear into the city. Ethan walked back to his own car, the understated black Audi, the one without the custom plates, parked in a garage 2 blocks north, with his hands in his pockets and his head full of noise. Not bad noise. That was the strange thing. For the first time in a long time, the noise in his head wasn't the low hum of anxiety and productivity that he'd learned to live inside. It wasn't the roster of unread emails or the quarterly projections or the question of whether his VP of engineering was about to quit. It wasn't the echo of a bedroom that had been empty for 4 years. It was just her. The way she'd held herself when she said, "I have 2 kids," like someone standing in a wind that had knocked her down before and fully expected it to do it again. The way she hadn't taken that as surrender. The way she'd shown up anyway. The way she'd said you were not disappointing, like each word cost her something and she'd decided to spend it. He sat in the car for a moment before starting it, looked at his phone. 11:04. Sophie would have been asleep for 3 hours by now. Mrs. Delgado from down the hall was watching her. He'd texted at 8 to check in and gotten back a string of emojis from Sophie's tablet and a brief all good from Mrs. Delgado. He pulled up his text with Lily. Their last conversation from 3 days ago was still there at the top. Something about whether or not Chicago-style deep dish counted as pizza or was actually a casserole in disguise. She'd argued casserole. He'd argued it didn't matter because the result was the same. She'd called that a cop-out. He started a new message. I'm glad you didn't delete the app. He stared at it for a moment, then sent it before he could overthink. Her reply came back in under a minute, while he was still sitting in the parking garage. I'm glad too. Get home safe. He drove home through the lit-up city, and the streets were empty, and the skyscrapers threw gold light against the dark sky. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Carter felt something he didn't have an efficient word for. Not happiness, exactly. Not hope, exactly. Something closer to the sensation of remembering very suddenly that you're alive. Later, weeks later, when things had changed and were still changing, Lily would think about that night. Not the glamorous parts, because there weren't any. Not the perfect romantic moment, because those were smaller and quieter than they looked in the movies. She'd think about the moment after she said, I have 2 kids, and watched Ethan's face. She'd been watching for the shift. That specific shift she'd learned to track. The small recalibration behind someone's eyes when they decided that the math didn't work, that she was too complicated, that her life had too many pieces already in play. He hadn't shifted. He'd asked about Marcus and Emma by name. She had dated men who couldn't remember which kid was older after 3 months. This man had remembered a detail she mentioned once in a text 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't diamonds or speeches or anything that would make the highlight reel. It was just memory, attention, the basic, radical act of having actually listened. She'd spent so long trying not to need things like that, so long telling herself that she was fine, that she didn't require the things other people required, that wanting someone to show up and stay was a luxury she wasn't built for anymore. Sitting in her car after that first night, stopped at a red light on Milwaukee Avenue with the radio playing something low and the heat blasting against the cold, she let herself think, for just a moment, what if this one is different? She didn't say it out loud. She'd learned better than that, but she let herself think it. And when you've trained yourself to hold everything at arm's length for long enough, the simple act of letting yourself think it feels a little bit like being brave. The light changed. She drove home. The city moved around her, indifferent and enormous, carrying everyone's private stories at once. And 2 people in 2 different cars driving home through the same city on the same Saturday night were thinking about the same thing. He called the next day at 11:17 in the morning, not because he'd planned to call at exactly that time. He'd been sitting at his kitchen island with his coffee going cold and his laptop open and a spreadsheet on the screen that he hadn't looked at in 40 minutes. Sophie was at her Saturday art class until noon, and the apartment was too quiet in that specific way it got when she wasn't in it. Not peaceful, just absent. And he'd been thinking about Lily Harper since he woke up at 6:30 and couldn't go back to sleep. He told himself he'd wait until afternoon. Give it space. Not seem desperate. He called at 11:17. She picked up on the 3rd ring. You said you'd call tomorrow. It's tomorrow. It's tomorrow, he confirmed. You actually did it. I said I would. There was a brief pause, and he heard something in the background, a crash. And then a child's voice saying something loud and unintelligible, and then Lily's voice away from the phone. Emma, that is not what bowls are for. Put it down. Then back to him. Sorry, Sunday mornings are a contact sport in this apartment. What did she do with the bowl? I don't want to know. I've decided not to investigate. He smiled at his kitchen counter. Smart strategy. I've been developing it for 5 years. Another noise in the background, this one more sustained. Is it okay if I call you back in like 20 minutes? I need to make sure no one drowns in cereal. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, don't. She stopped, started again. I'll call you back. She hung up. He sat with his dead phone in his hand and his cold coffee and felt something he couldn't immediately name. It took him a moment to work out what it was. It was the sensation of mattering to someone's morning without being in it. She called back in 18 minutes. Okay, she said, slightly breathless. I'm in the bathroom with the door locked. This is my office now. That's resourceful. It's survival. He heard her sit down on something, probably the edge of the tub, he thought, for some reason. How's your morning? Quieter than yours. Don't rub it in, but her voice was warm. Sophie at her dad's. Art class. Until noon. What's she making? He'd asked exactly this question on Friday afternoon and could report accurately. This week they're doing self-portraits in watercolor. Last week was clay bowls. She made me a very lopsided ashtray. Do you smoke? Never. Perfect gift then. I have it on my desk. Lily laughed. That same laugh from dinner, the one she sometimes tried to catch and couldn't quite manage. He already liked that laugh more than he had any right to after one date and 2 phone calls. So, she said, and the word had a question in it that she hadn't finished yet. So, he said back. Last night was... She paused. He waited. It was a good night. It was. I'm not great at this part, she said. The morning after the first date part. I either overthink everything I said or I just... Another pause. Disappear into logistics. What kind of logistics? Work schedules, childcare coverage, the 17 things I have to get done before Monday, the usual. And which one are you doing right now? Honestly? A small breath. Neither. I'm sitting in my bathroom talking to you. That's the third option. Yeah. Her voice was quieter now, the surface-level energy of managing Sunday morning chaos settling into something underneath. It is. They talked for 45 minutes. He didn't look at the spreadsheet once. The conversation was different from the night before. Less the careful forward motion of 2 strangers finding their footing, more the looser, less curated version of each other that surfaces the morning after when there's nothing left to perform. She told him about her apartment, a 2-bedroom in Wicker Park that she split with Marcus and Emma, which meant Marcus had a room and Emma had a room, and Lily slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room and had been sleeping on it for a year and a half and had stopped noticing. You sleep on a pull-out sofa, he said. The kids needed the rooms. Lily, don't, she said, not sharply, just firmly. It's fine. It's temporary. He didn't push, but he heard it. The thing she'd said, the "it's temporary," and the way she'd said it with the particular practiced conviction of someone who needed to believe something to keep going. He knew that sound. He'd made it himself. Before she hung up, she said carefully, Do you want to get coffee sometime? During the week. Nothing complicated. Yeah, he said. I want that. Okay. And there was something in that one word. Relief, maybe, dressed as casualness. I'll look at my schedule. He looked at his schedule the moment they hung up and spent 10 minutes finding a gap. They met for coffee that Wednesday at a place on Damon called Spoke, which was the kind of Chicago coffee shop that existed in the narrow territory between genuinely good and insufferably self-aware about being genuinely good. Exposed brick, mismatched chairs, a menu written on the back of what appeared to be a reclaimed door. Lily was already there when he arrived. She was in scrubs, the dental office uniform, blue with a small stain near the hem that she either hadn't noticed or had stopped noticing. And her hair was pulled back and she looked tired in the way people look tired in the middle of a week that hasn't let up. She also looked, to his complete inconvenience, better than she had on Saturday. I came straight from work, she said by way of apology. You look fine. I look like I've been explaining dental insurance for 8 hours. Which is fine, he said. I've been in meetings since 7:30. We're even. She looked at him skeptically. What do you wear to meetings? Today? He glanced down at himself. Dark trousers, white shirt, no tie. This. That's what you wear to work? It's a tech company. Someone wore a hoodie to our last board presentation. Was it you? It was not me. I have limits. She smiled at her coffee cup. They were at a corner table near the window, and the afternoon light was doing something generous to the room, the kind of light that makes everything look a little warmer than it actually is. Outside, the Damon Avenue foot traffic moved in both directions, everyone leaning slightly into the wind. Can I ask you something? She said. You can always ask me something. When you said you've been on 4 dates in 11 months? She turned her cup in her hands. Is that because you weren't trying or because it kept not working? He thought about lying, not maliciously, just the white lie version where you make yourself sound a little less like a person who'd spent the better part of a year actively avoiding the thing he said he was pursuing. Both, he said instead. Why? Because when Sophie's mom died, it took me... He stopped. It took me longer than I expected to stop feeling like I was still married. He looked at his coffee. Even after I stopped feeling married, I didn't know what I was supposed to feel like, so I worked. And then Sophie asked about New Year's Eve. Lily was quiet for a moment. Outside, a woman walked past with 3 dogs pulling in different directions, and she watched them through the window before looking back at him. My kid's dad, she said slowly, was not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. Okay. He was just someone who decided he wanted a different life than the one we were building. When Emma was 8 months old, she said it without venom or performance, just the flat statement of it. He's around sometimes, not reliably. Marcus has gotten used to it. Emma doesn't fully understand it yet. How do you handle it when she asks? Carefully, she exhaled. Very carefully. He nodded. The guy I dated after, she said, that was the one who disappeared when he met Marcus. They met at a park, nothing planned. Marcus had a bad day, and he was cranky and not remotely interested in making a good impression. And I watched this man's face, and I could just... She shook her head. See it happen, the whole calculation. And 2 weeks later, he stopped answering texts. How old was Marcus? 6. Ethan was quiet for a moment. That's a terrible thing to teach a 6-year-old. Yeah. She looked at him. That's why I told you about them early. On Saturday. I wasn't trying to scare you off. I was just... She made a gesture with her hand, the kind that means you understand the rest. Testing the water. The water and the ground and the structural integrity of the whole situation. She picked up her coffee. I'm not apologetic about it. You shouldn't be. Some people think it's aggressive. Some people are wrong. She tilted her head, studying him. He'd noticed she did this when she was recalibrating, turning the information over, looking at it from a slightly different angle. You're very calm, she said. I'm not calm. I'm controlled. What's the difference? Calm is genuine. Controlled is a choice. She looked at him for a long moment. That might be the most honest thing I've heard someone say about themselves in a very long time. Don't be too impressed. I had a very expensive therapist for 3 years. She laughed. Did it help? Enormously. Highly recommend. I've thought about it, she said. What stopped you? She gave him a look that was so matter-of-fact it almost didn't register as pain. I work 2 jobs, Ethan. Right. He caught himself. Sorry. Don't apologize. It's just... She gestured at the space between them. Your world and my world are different. I don't say that to be dramatic. It's just geography. I know. Does that bother you? He held her gaze. Does what bother me? The geography. He thought about it, actually thought about it, instead of reaching for the easy answer. Not in the way you mean, he said finally. What way do I mean? You mean, am I embarrassed by it or uncomfortable with it? And the answer is no. He paused. What I think about is whether it's fair to you. Whether I... He stopped, reformulated. I've spent the last 4 years inside a particular version of the world, and I don't always know how to get outside of it. I don't want to be oblivious in ways that... He made a gesture similar to the one she'd made earlier. She looked at him carefully. That's a more thoughtful answer than I expected. I told you, expensive therapist. Seriously, though, she said it quietly. That matters to me. The fact that you thought about it instead of just reassuring me. They stayed for another hour. He was late getting back to the office. He didn't care. The following Saturday, she texted him at 9 in the morning. Marcus has a soccer game at 11 if you want to come. No pressure. Actually, significant pressure because I just typed it and now can't unsend it. He stared at the message for approximately 4 seconds. Tell me the address, he typed back. She sent him a Google Maps pin, and 3 seconds later, you don't have to, Lily. Yeah, okay. The soccer field was at a park in Humboldt, a flat stretch of public grass with 2 sets of metal bleachers and a concession stand that smelled like burned coffee and hot dogs. Parents stood in clusters or sat with thermoses and folding chairs, and the kids on the field moved in that particular 8-year-old soccer formation where everyone is trying to be near the ball simultaneously, regardless of what position they were assigned. Lily was on the bleachers with Emma in her lap. Emma bundled in a puffy pink coat and wearing one glove and holding the other one because she'd refused to put it on. She spotted Ethan before he reached her and said something to Emma that he couldn't hear. He climbed the bleachers and sat beside her, close but not aggressively close. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He looked at the field. "Which one is Marcus?" "Number 11, blue shirt." She pointed. "He's there, by the left goal." He found number 11, a compact, serious-faced kid with Lily's same brown eyes, currently arguing with a teammate about something that appeared to involve hand gestures and strong feelings. "He looks like you," Ethan said. "Everyone says that. He got my disposition too, unfortunately for both of us." Emma had turned to look at him with the frank, unblinking evaluation of a 5-year-old who had not yet learned that staring is rude and did not care to learn it. "Hi," Ethan said to her. Emma said nothing. She just stared, one glove on, one glove dangling from her fist. "Emma," Lily said. "He's tall," Emma announced. "He is," Lily agreed. "Why?" "That's just how he is." Emma appeared to accept this. She turned back to the field, apparently satisfied that the intruder had been assessed and found unthreatening, though she kept him in her peripheral vision with the tactical awareness of someone who did not fully trust the situation. Ethan bit the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. The game started. Marcus's team was playing another 8-year-old team from a different neighborhood, and the game was exactly what 8-year-old soccer is: chaotic, earnest, and occasionally brilliant in unexpected ways. Marcus turned out to be fast. Genuinely fast, the kind of fast that wasn't just effort, but something structural, some specific way his body was built for quick movement. He chased the ball with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable to watch. "He takes it seriously," Ethan said. "He takes everything seriously." Lily shifted Emma's weight on her lap. "He's been like that since he was 3. Everything is an event." "He sounds like someone I used to know." She glanced at him. "You?" "Me at 8, yes." "Is that a comfortable thing to say or an honest thing to say?" "Honest. I was—" He watched Marcus intercept a ball with zero hesitation and take off at full speed toward the other end. "I was a very serious kid." "What happened?" "I stayed serious. I got better at hiding it." He paused. "And then I had Sophie, and she burned through a lot of the hiding." She was looking at the field, but he could tell she was listening to all of it. "Sophie sounds like a character." "She is. You'd like her." The sentence came out before he'd fully decided to say it. He felt Lily's attention shift slightly. Not in a bad way, but in the way that meant I noticed that, and he didn't walk it back. "Maybe," she said. Just that. Emma, without any preamble, leaned sideways from her mother's lap and put her head against Ethan's arm. Not his lap, just his arm, like a piece of furniture she'd decided was useful. She kept her eyes on the field. He stayed absolutely still. Lily looked at him sideways. He could feel her reading him again, watching for discomfort or uncertainty or the performance of being fine with something he wasn't actually fine with. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced the granola bar he'd grabbed on his way out of the apartment and held it out toward Emma, who assessed it without moving her head. "Is that peanut?" Lily asked. "No. Oats and honey. The wrapper's in my pocket if you want to check." She looked at him, then at Emma. "Emma, do you want it?" Emma took the granola bar, sat back up straight, and went about opening it with the focused efficiency of someone who had made a decision and was done discussing it. Marcus scored in the 22nd minute. He didn't celebrate the way kids do on TV, with running and arms out and screaming. He just pumped his fist once, looked at the sideline until he found his mother's face in the bleachers, and nodded. Like they had an agreement. Lily caught it. She nodded back. Ethan watched this exchange happen in under 3 seconds and felt something in his chest that he didn't try to name. After the game, Marcus's team won 3-1. Lily took the kids to the concession stand and Ethan hung back, giving her space, which he'd been calibrating carefully all morning. He wasn't trying to be present and absent at the same time, just trying to read where the edges were. He was standing near the bleachers watching the other families disperse when he heard footsteps, and turned to find Marcus standing about 5 feet away, looking at him. The kid had his soccer bag over one shoulder and mud on both knees, and was regarding Ethan with the same measuring stillness that Lily had when she first sat down across from him at Carmine's on Wabash. "You're the guy my mom went to dinner with," Marcus said. "I am. I'm Ethan." "She said your name." "Good things, I hope." Marcus considered this. She said you were nice. That's accurate, mostly. Mostly? I'm also sometimes very boring at parties. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something around his eyes did, like he was filing that away. I'm Marcus. I know. I watched you play. You're fast. The kid's chin came up slightly. Not pride exactly. More like acknowledgement. My coach says I need to work on passing. Your coach is probably right. I know. He paused. Did you play soccer? Football, when I was about your age. Were you good? Average. I was better at things you could do alone. Like what? Ethan thought about it honestly. Running, coding, eventually, reading. Marcus looked at him for another moment. My mom doesn't bring people to my games. I know. She told me. Why'd she bring you? It was a direct question, no softening on it, delivered with the specific gravity of an 8-year-old who had figured out that adults sometimes said things around the edges of what they actually meant and wanted to skip that part. Ethan appreciated it more than he expected to. She invited me, he said, and I wanted to come. Why? Because I like your mom, and because she talked about you. Marcus looked at the ground for a moment, then back up. Are you going to disappear? The question landed flat and clean in the cold morning air. Ethan didn't look away. No. You don't know that. That's true. He said it without flinching, but I'm not planning on it. Marcus held his gaze for 3 full seconds, which is a long time for an 8-year-old and feels even longer when you're being measured by 1. Then he nodded. Once. Picked up his soccer bag and walked toward the concession stand where Lily was handing Emma a cup of hot chocolate. Ethan exhaled. He stood there in the cold park air, hands in his pockets, watching a woman in a second-hand coat divide her attention between 2 children and somehow make the whole difficult thing look ordinary, and he understood something he hadn't quite let himself understand before. He was already in this. He wasn't standing at the edge of something, deciding. He'd stopped standing at the edge at some point between the restaurant and the coffee shop and this soccer field, and he hadn't noticed it happening until right now, with the cold wind off the park and the sound of the concession stand shutting down and Marcus's serious 8-year-old voice still in his ears. Are you going to disappear? Lily looked up from the concession stand and found him across the park. She raised her eyebrows slightly. You okay? And he nodded. She looked at him for a second longer, then went back to Emma and the hot chocolate. He walked toward them. 2 weeks after that, he told Margaret to block Thursday evenings permanently. When she asked why, he said it was personal. She wrote it down without the eyebrow. He and Lily had settled into Thursday evenings. Not every Thursday, not with any formal declaration, just an informal rhythm that established itself the way rhythms do when 2 people keep choosing the same thing. Sometimes it was dinner. Sometimes it was just coffee and a walk when the weather wasn't punishing. Once it was a late afternoon movie that neither of them particularly liked, but neither of them suggested leaving because the point had never really been the movie. She told him things slowly, not in any orchestrated way, just the gradual accumulation of information that happens when someone is deciding in real time how much of themselves to let through the door. He learned that she hadn't had health insurance for 2 years and was terrified every time one of the kids got a fever. He learned that Marcus had been in therapy since his father left, twice a month, a therapist named Doctor Okonkwo, who Marcus referred to only as my guy, which was apparently a whole thing. He learned that Lily had taken 1 college semester before money ran out, and that she kept the textbooks because she told herself she'd go back, and that they were now living in a box in the back of her closet that she hadn't opened in 3 years. He didn't offer to fix things. That had been a conscious decision, and a hard one, because the specific way his brain worked, the problem identification, solution architecture thing that had made him wealthy, made it physically uncomfortable to hear about a problem he could theoretically solve and say nothing. But he understood. At some level he was still figuring out that offering to fix it would change what they were. He told her things too, slowly, the way he'd actually felt the night Claire died. Not grief exactly, not at first, more like the terrifying suspension of a world that had stopped making any structural sense, and the very specific loneliness of grieving someone while also trying to care for a 3-year-old who didn't understand why Daddy kept going into the bathroom and closing the door. He told her about the year he'd more or less run his company from the couch while Sophie slept because he was afraid to be more than 15 feet from her. He told her that he still sometimes woke at 3 in the morning from a dream he couldn't remember and lay there in the dark for 20 minutes before he could make himself go back to sleep. "Does it get better?" she asked. They were on a walk along the river, their breath-making clouds in the November air. She was asking about grief in general, her own, the chronic low-grade version of it that came from raising kids alone and running out of money and being left by people. "I don't think it gets better," he said. "I think you just get a little more practiced at carrying it." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not very encouraging." "It's honest." "Yeah," she looked at the water. "Yeah, it is." He reached over without really thinking about it and tucked her hand into his arm. Not a grand gesture, just her hand was cold and he had a coat with a warm sleeve and it seemed like the obvious thing. She didn't move away. They walked like that for another block before either of them said anything else. And the city moved around them on both sides, loud and indifferent and completely unconcerned with the two of them and their careful, complicated beginning. That night, walking back to her car, she drove now, had given up on the red line for their meetings because the commute was too long and she'd stopped minding the parking costs. She stopped on the sidewalk and turned to him. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay." "I keep waiting for you to do the thing." "What thing?" "The thing." She made a gesture. "The thing where it goes sideways, where I find out there's a part of you that I can't actually deal with, or a part of my life that you can't actually deal with." He held her gaze. And you keep not doing it." She sounded almost frustrated. "It's very inconvenient." "Deeply sorry." "I'm being serious." "I know." He was. "What do you need from me? To know it's real?" She looked at him for a moment, pulled her coat tighter. "I don't know. Maybe just keep showing up. Don't make promises. Just keep showing up." "That I can do." "Don't say it like it's easy." "It's not easy. I'm saying I can do it." She held his gaze for another second. Then she nodded, just once, like they'd shaken hands on something that mattered and couldn't be undone. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Lily." She got in her car. He watched the lights pull away into the night, and he stood there on the cold sidewalk in November feeling the weight of the thing he'd just agreed to. Not with dread, but with the clean, specific gravity of someone who has just made a decision they intend to keep. The city was still loud around him. The wind was still doing its committed, relentless Chicago thing. Somewhere across town, Sophie was asleep in her room, and in Wicker Park, Marcus and Emma were asleep in theirs, and the adults in their lives were standing in the spaces between, learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to stop being so afraid of what it would cost them to stay. The first time Sophie met Lily, it was an accident, not the kind of accident that gets planned and then called an accident afterward to reduce the pressure of it. An actual accident, the kind that arrives sideways on a Wednesday afternoon in late November when 3 separate things go wrong at the same time, and the solution involves 2 adults who'd been carefully keeping their lives in separate compartments, suddenly finding themselves in the same room. It started with the dental office calling Lily at 2:15 to tell her the afternoon receptionist had gone home sick, and could she possibly come in for a half shift? It continued with the after-school program at Sophie's school, calling Ethan at 2:43 to inform him that the building's heating system had failed, and they were sending all the kids home early, and could someone please come get Sophie by 3:30? It concluded with Ethan sitting in a board call that he absolutely could not exit, his driver unavailable, Mrs. Delgado not picking up, and exactly one person in his phone whose Thursday afternoon he trusted enough to interrupt. He texted Lily before he fully thought it through. "I have a situation. Sophie's school let out early. I'm stuck in a call I can't leave. My backup isn't answering. Is there any universe where—" She replied in under a minute. "What's her teacher's name and what does Sophie look like?" He stared at the message. "You're at work. I can leave in 20 minutes. Teacher's name." "Lily, you don't have to—" "Ethan. Teacher's name." He typed it out. "Ms. Reyes." Sophie had a green backpack with a dinosaur patch on the front, and as of this morning she'd been wearing a yellow wool hat that she refused to take off indoors or outdoors because she'd decided it was her hat now, and the discussion was over. Lily texted back, "Got it. I'll send you a photo when we're in the car, so you know she's with me." He sat in his board call for the next 20 minutes, contributing approximately 30% of his usual cognitive capacity to the discussion of Q4 projections. And at 3:47, his phone buzzed with a photo. Sophie. In the back seat of Lily's silver Civic. Yellow hat slightly askew, looking at the camera with the specific expression of a 7-year-old who has just been collected from school by a stranger and is reserving judgment. Lily's hand was visible at the edge of the frame, on the steering wheel, the only part of her in the picture. Ethan looked at that photo for longer than was probably appropriate given that he was still technically on a board call. He got out of the call at 4:20 and called Lily immediately. "She's fine," Lily said before he could speak. "She ate a granola bar and told me in significant detail about a disagreement she had with a classmate named Jordan over whose drawing of a horse was more accurate." "That sounds right." "She has very strong opinions about horse anatomy. She went through a horse phase in September. We watched a lot of YouTube videos." She mentioned. A pause, and he could hear the low sound of the city through her car windows. "We're almost at your building. She told me where it was." "She told you?" She said, and I'm quoting, "Daddy lives in the tall silver building that looks like a robot." I figured that was enough to work with. He was already grabbing his coat from the back of his chair. "I'll be downstairs in 3 minutes." He made it in 2. Sophie was on the sidewalk in front of the building when he came through the lobby doors, the yellow hat crammed over her ears and her backpack hanging off one shoulder, talking to Lily with an animation he recognized, the particular full-body expressiveness she deployed when something had genuinely engaged her interest. Lily was crouched down to Sophie's level, hands in her coat pockets, listening with the same focused attention she gave everything, and she was smiling. "Dad," Sophie announced when she saw him, "Lily knows about horses." "Does she?" "She had one, when she was a kid, on a farm in Wisconsin." He looked at Lily, who stood up from her crouch. "You grew up on a farm?" "My grandparents' farm, every summer until I was 12. She said it simply, like it was a detail she'd forgotten was interesting until a 7-year-old made it interesting again. "I haven't thought about that in years." "You should get one," Sophie told her, with the confident authority of someone who had not yet encountered the realities of maintaining livestock. "A horse?" "Yes." "I live in an apartment, sweetie." Sophie considered this. "A small horse, then?" Ethan caught Lily's eye over Sophie's head. Lily pressed her lips together in the specific way that meant she was suppressing a laugh, and he felt something turn over in his chest, warm and entirely inconvenient. He took Sophie's backpack. "Thank you," he said to Lily. "Seriously, you didn't have to do that." "I know." She said it simply. "Can we buy Lily dinner?" Sophie asked, looking between the two of them with the directness of someone who had not yet learned to disguise her intentions. "Because she got me from school, and that is a nice thing, and nice things should get rewarded." "That's an interesting moral framework," Ethan said. "My teacher says it." Lily laughed, and this time she didn't catch it. "I should actually get back. Emma's at her after-school program until 6, and Marcus has a school project." "Just dinner," Sophie said. "Fast dinner. We have a good pizza place." "Sophie, it's around the corner. We go a lot. The guy there knows our order." She looked at Lily. "Do you like pizza?" Lily looked at her for a moment, then at Ethan. He gave her nothing. No rescue and no pressure, just the neutral face of a man who had decided this was not his call. "Yeah," Lily said, "I like pizza." The pizza place was called Palazzo's, and it was the size of a living room, and the guy behind the counter was named Gino, and he did in fact know their order. He gave Sophie a small cup of olives while they waited because he always gave Sophie a small cup of olives while they waited, and Sophie took them with the solemnity of someone receiving something earned. She shared 3 olives with Lily without being asked, which Ethan noted privately because Sophie shared food with approximately 4 people on Earth, and only when she'd decided they were worth it. They sat at the small table in the corner. Sophie occupied the conversation for the first 15 minutes with the horse discussion, which expanded to cover other animals she wanted but couldn't have, a brief detour into why dinosaurs were not actually scary if you understood them correctly, and an account of the Jordan horse drawing disagreement that was so detailed, Ethan began to suspect she had been waiting for an audience. Lily was good with her. not performing good, genuinely comfortable, asking questions that showed she was actually listening, not condescending and not falsely enthusiastic. When Sophie said something that was objectively incorrect about dinosaur biology, Lily gently offered the actual information instead of just nodding, and Sophie received the correction without defensiveness because it had been delivered without condescension. He watched this happening and thought about Marcus's question in the park. "Are you going to disappear?" "Sophie," Lily said at one point, breaking into a pause in the conversation, "can I ask you something?" "Yes," Sophie said with a piece of pizza halfway to her mouth. "What do you think makes someone a good friend? Not a best friend, just a good one." Sophie chewed, considered with genuine seriousness. "They remember things," she said finally, "about you. Like what you like and what you don't like, and they don't make fun of you for it." "That's a really good answer." "I know." She bit into her pizza. "Jordan should learn it." Ethan was looking at Lily when Sophie said it, and he saw something move through her expression, something she pulled back before it fully surfaced, but he'd been paying attention long enough to catch it. Not sadness, something closer to recognition. Later, when dinner was done and Lily was pulling on her coat in the narrow space between tables, Sophie said, from completely out of nowhere, "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Lily froze for exactly 1 second. Ethan chose violence and stayed silent. "We're friends," Lily said, carefully. Sophie absorbed this. "Do you like him?" "Sophie," Ethan said. "That's a real question," Sophie said, not looking at him. She was looking at Lily with an expression that was, at this point, simply her natural face. Serious, direct, waiting. Lily looked at her for a moment, then, "Yeah," she said, "I like him." "Good." Sophie picked up her jacket from the back of her chair. "Because he needs someone to like him. He works too much." She said it with the offhand certainty of a comment delivered so many times, it no longer felt like criticism. Then she walked toward the door and pushed it open, letting in a gust of November air. Lily stared at the door she'd gone through. Ethan picked up his card from the table. "She's something," Lily said. "She's relentless is what she is. She's wonderful." She said it quietly, and she meant it. He could tell when Lily meant things. She had no particular gift for or interest in concealing them. He held the door open. She walked through. Outside, Sophie was already a few paces ahead, walking with the single-minded forward motion of a child who knew where she was going. Lily stopped on the sidewalk. "I have to go," she said. "I know. Thank you for dinner." "You drove across the city to pick up my daughter from school. She's easy company." "I'll tell her you said that. It'll go straight to her head." He paused. "Lily." "Yeah?" He couldn't find the right sentence. There was a version of what he wanted to say that was true but not complete, and a version that was complete but too much for a sidewalk on a Wednesday night with his daughter 20 feet ahead, ignoring them with suspicious deliberateness. "I'll call you Thursday," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Okay. And thank you. For real." She nodded once, walked to her car. And he stood there with the cold air coming off the street, watching her go, and heard Sophie's voice behind him. "Dad, it's cold. Can we go in?" "Yeah," he said. "We can go in." That night, after Sophie was in bed and the apartment was quiet, Ethan sat at the kitchen island with a glass of water and his phone and stayed with the feeling of the evening for a long time before trying to make sense of it. He wasn't sure when it had shifted. There wasn't a single moment he could point to. Not the first dinner, not the soccer game, not the coffee shop on Damon. It was more like water finding its level over time, patient and inevitable. He'd started out careful, which was how he started out with everything. He'd cataloged his own feelings with the same slightly detached efficiency he brought to business decisions, assessing risk, weighing variables, trying to establish where the edges were before committing weight to anything. But somewhere in the last several weeks, he'd run out of distance. He'd used it all up. There was no part of himself left that was standing back and observing. He was just in it, all of it, and the realization didn't frighten him the way he'd expected it to. What frightened him was something else, something he hadn't looked at directly yet. He was scared of what happened to Lily when things didn't work out. Not in a general sense, in a specific, very clear-eyed sense. He'd heard enough of her history, not all of it, but enough, to understand that she had spent years building walls that were not dramatic or self-pitying, just practical. Load-bearing walls. Structures she'd erected because the alternative was being crushed, and she had children who needed her not to be crushed. Every time she let him a little further in, she was dismantling something structural. She was doing it anyway, carefully, with her eyes open. And that meant, if he got this wrong, if he let himself go all the way in and then discovered some version of himself that couldn't do it, he wouldn't just be hurting himself. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He typed, "Sophie said to tell you that you're good at listening." Her words. 3 minutes later, "That might be the best review I've ever gotten. She doesn't give them out easily." "I know, she told me." He smiled at his phone in his empty kitchen like an idiot, and for once didn't try to talk himself out of it. 3 days later, on a Saturday, Lily called him at noon while he was in the middle of a grocery run. He was in the cereal aisle trying to remember if they were out of the kind Sophie would eat versus the 17 kinds Sophie refused to eat when his phone rang and he answered without looking. "Hey," she said. And something in that one word was different. He put down the box. "What happened?" "Nothing. It's not an emergency. Marcus is fine. Emma's fine." A pause. "I got a letter this morning from my landlord." He waited. "He's selling the building." Her voice was steady in the way it got when she was holding something together by force. "Current tenants get 60 days. To find somewhere new." "Yeah." He stood in the cereal aisle of a grocery store on a Saturday afternoon and did not say any of the things that came immediately to mind, which were all versions of, "Let me help dressed in different clothes." He understood this, in his bones, because he'd been on the other side of it. The moment when the situation is beyond your current capacity and someone with more resources than you looks at you and you can feel their help coming and you're not sure if you want it because of what it will mean to receive it. "Where are you right now?" he asked. "Kitchen. Kids are at their dad's until 4. A pause. "He actually showed up this time." "Okay." He moved his cart to the edge of the aisle out of traffic. "What do you need right now? Not later? Not next week? Right now?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," she said. And the honesty of it, the plain admission of not knowing, was different from the careful management she usually deployed when things were hard. It meant she was more rattled than the steady voice was letting on. "Can I come over?" he asked. I know I don't have to. Can I?" Another pause. He heard her breathe out. "Yeah," she said, "you can come over." He abandoned the grocery cart in the cereal aisle. He'd come back later, or he wouldn't, it didn't matter, and drove to Wicker Park. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a narrow walk-up on Evergreen Avenue, and he'd never been inside. She'd never invited him. He'd understood that too. The apartment was her space, her life with her kids, and she'd been careful about the lines between what she shared with him and what she kept separate. It wasn't rejection, it was structure. It was a woman who had learned the hard way that when you let someone all the way in and then they leave, the leaving is everywhere. She buzzed him up without comment. He climbed the stairs, 2 flights, narrow, 1 light out on the 2nd landing, and she was standing in the open doorway when he reached the top. She was in a faded sweatshirt and jeans, her hair up, no makeup, and the apartment behind her was exactly what he'd have imagined if he'd tried. Small, full, completely hers. A couch that had been through some things. A bookshelf that was overcrowded in the specific way of someone who loves books and doesn't have enough shelves. Children's drawings taped to the refrigerator visible through the open kitchen doorway. A pair of small sneakers by the door that were very clearly Emma's because they had a unicorn on them. She stepped back to let him in. He came in and didn't look around with the cataloging eye of someone assessing. He just looked the way you look when you're in someone's home for the first time and you're trying to understand them better. "It's small," she said, not apologetically, just factually. "It feels like you," he said. She looked at him. "Let that sit for a second." Then she went to the kitchen and he followed, and she showed him the letter. It was brief, which somehow made it worse. Official letterhead, 60 days notice, the boilerplate language of a transaction that someone on the other end had decided without thinking about who was on this end. He read it, handed it back. "Okay," he said. "What's the realistic window for finding something? In Chicago? In this rental market?" She set the letter on the counter. 60 days is tight. Not impossible, but tight. Do you know what your budget is? She named a number. He kept his face neutral, which cost him something because the number was genuinely difficult in the current Chicago market, and they both knew it. Your credit's okay? Yeah, I've been very careful about that. Good. That matters. He leaned against the counter across from her. Lauren's still in the city. Pilsen. Does she have space short-term if it comes to that? Lily's jaw tightened slightly. I'm not putting my kids in Lauren's one bedroom. I'm not suggesting you do. I'm asking if you have options in the worst case. She looked at him. The tightness in her jaw didn't fully disappear. I'm not the kind of person who asks for Lily. He said her name quietly. Not to cut her off, just to stop the sentence from going where he could see it going. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to think through the problem with you. There's a difference. She held his gaze for a long moment. She was looking for the thing. He could feel it, that habitual search for the catch, the asterisk, the part where help came with something attached that cost more than the help was worth. Okay, she said finally, exhaled. Okay, walk me through it. So they did. At her kitchen table, the small one with 4 chairs, 2 of which had drawings stuck to the back with tape that Marcus and Emma had apparently decided was decoration. They sat with her laptop and went through listings, looked at neighborhoods, mapped commute times from possible schools for Marcus and Emma, discussed the math of deposit plus first and last month in different areas. He pulled up what he knew about renters' rights in Illinois. She had questions he couldn't answer and wrote them down on a piece of paper with a pencil she found in a drawer that was otherwise full of rubber bands, dead batteries, and the kind of accumulated household detritus that every kitchen drawer eventually becomes. He didn't offer money. She didn't ask. That boundary hung in the room between them, visible to both of them, and by unspoken agreement they left it where it was. At one point Emma called from her dad's, a short call, her voice small and bright through the phone. Mommy, we got McDonald's and I got a toy and it's a pony. Lily's whole face changed when she picked up. The stressed, scanning for problems expression went somewhere else, and she became just a mother, full stop. A pony? What color? Pink, Mommy. It's pink and it has a tail. Show me when you get home, okay? I want to see it. Okay, Mommy. Bye. The call lasted 40 seconds. Lily set the phone down and looked at the laptop and said very quietly, She's going to ask why we're moving. What will you tell her? Something age-appropriate and honest. Same thing I always do. She pressed her fingertips to the table. It's Marcus I'm thinking about. He just got settled. His school, his soccer team, his... She stopped. Dr. Okonkwo is near here. Is the commute from a different neighborhood going to be a problem for that? It'll be another thing on the list. She said it without self-pity, which made it worse than if she'd sounded sorry for herself. She was just naming the list. The list was long. He looked at her across the small kitchen table with the dead batteries in the drawer and the children's drawings on the chairs and the 60-day letter folded on the counter, and he felt the full weight of something he hadn't let himself name yet. Can I tell you something? He said. Yeah. He chose words carefully, not to hide himself behind them, to say the actual thing. I don't know how to do this without it sounding like something you'll want to push back on. She looked at him. Try anyway. I want to help, not fix it, not take it over. But I have resources you don't, and some of this would be easier if you let me use them. Specifically, I have a contact at a real estate management company that handles several hundred units in the north and northwest sides. And a phone call from me gets things in front of you faster than the public listing process. That's not money. That's just a phone call. She was quiet. I'm not trying to make you feel like you owe me anything, he said. And I'm not going to treat it like something you should be grateful for. It's just, he searched for the right word, available, if you want it. She looked at the letter on the counter, at the laptop, out the kitchen window at the gray November sky. Okay, she said. Not eagerly, not warmly, just the bare practical agreement of someone who had run the numbers and decided that pride was a luxury item right now. Make the call. He nodded. Then she looked back at him. Why are you doing all this? He met her eyes. Because you matter to me. She held his gaze for a long moment. Outside, a city bus rumbled past on Evergreen Avenue. The radiator in the corner ticked and hissed. This terrifies me, she said. I know. You matter to me too, and that terrifies me. I know, he said again. Me too. She looked at him. Something moved through her face. Not relief, not resolution. More like the specific sensation of two people arriving at the edge of something at the same time and discovering that the other person is also there. Don't make me regret this, she said, quietly, completely without drama. I'm going to do everything in my power not to, he said, which was as honest as he could be. And with Lily Harper, honest was always enough. That week he made the phone call. Within 3 days, she had 3 viewings lined up in neighborhoods she could afford. Buildings with actual superintendents and functional heating, and one of them had a small second bedroom that could function as her own, not a pull-out sofa in the living room. She didn't tell him which one she chose until after she'd signed the paperwork, which he understood completely. It was hers. The deciding had to be hers. She texted him on a Thursday. I signed a lease. Avondale, second floor. Marcus gets the bigger room because Emma changes what she wants every 6 minutes, and I'm not repainting twice. He typed back, congratulations. A pause. Then, thank you for the call and for not making it weird. I have my moments. You do, she wrote back. And then, after a brief pause, Sophie was right, by the way. He looked at the message, confused. About what? You work too much. But you show up when it counts. That's the harder thing. He sat with that for a while. Let it land where it was supposed to. Outside his office window, Chicago spread in every direction, gray and enormous and fully occupied with its own relentless business, indifferent as always to the small human decisions happening inside it. But inside those decisions, inside the specific weight of what Lily had just said and what he just understood it to mean, something was different than it had been 6 weeks ago. He was no longer afraid of how quickly he'd fallen into this. He was afraid of something else now. The ordinary, specific fear of not deserving it. The fear that she had looked at him clearly, without illusion, and chosen to stay anyway, and the question that came with that was whether he could do the same. Show up as himself, imperfect and controlled and still learning, and let that be enough. He was going to try. He had decided to try. And in Avondale, in an apartment she hadn't moved into yet but had already started furnishing in her head, Lily Harper was doing the same thing, allowing herself, carefully and against her better-trained instincts, to imagine a future that had more people in it than just the 3 of them. It was the bravest thing she'd done in years. She didn't tell anyone that. She just held it quietly, the way you hold something fragile in both hands until you're sure you've got it. They moved Lily into the Avondale apartment on a Saturday in early December, 3 weeks before Christmas. Ethan showed up at 7:30 in the morning with coffee, 4 cups, because he'd learned by now that Lauren, Lily's friend who had originally signed her up for the app, and who Lily described as chaotic and indispensable in equal measure, had agreed to help. And Lauren had made it very clear in a group text that she did not function before caffeine. He also brought donuts, because Sophie had insisted on contributing to the moving effort, and donuts were the contribution she was capable of making at 7 in the morning. Sophie was with him. That had also been Sophie's idea, delivered at dinner the previous Thursday with the same flat certainty she applied to most of her decisions. I want to help Lily move. He'd started to explain that moving day was complicated, and maybe they should let Lily handle it with her own people. And Sophie had looked at him with an expression that communicated, without a single word, that this was not a reasonable position, and she didn't understand why he was taking it. He'd called Lily. Lily had said after a pause, "If she wants to come, she can come. Emma will be thrilled." Emma had indeed been thrilled. The moment Sophie walked through the door of the old Wicker Park apartment, where boxes were stacked against every wall and the couch cushions were piled on the floor, and the whole place had that specific hollow echo of a space being emptied out, Emma attached herself to Sophie's side with the immediate, uncomplicated devotion of a 5-year-old who had decided on a person. Sophie, to her credit, handled this with more grace than most adults managed, accepting Emma's hand in hers and allowing herself to be dragged immediately to Emma's room to inspect the pony that was pink with a tail, which was apparently still the most important object in the household. Marcus was in the kitchen when Ethan came in with the coffee. He was taping a box, focused and methodical, and he looked up when Ethan entered. "Hey," Marcus said. "Hey." Ethan set the coffee on the counter. You need help with that box? I got it. He pressed the tape down firmly. Then, Mom said you got us the apartment. I made a phone call. Your mom got the apartment. Marcus looked at him. It was the same look as the soccer field, the measuring one, the one that took things apart to see how they worked. She wouldn't let you pay for it. No, but you wanted to. Ethan picked up one of the coffees. I wanted to help. There's a difference. That's what she said. Marcus picked up the box. She says a lot of the same stuff you say. He carried the box to the stack by the door without waiting for a response. And Ethan stood in the emptied kitchen and thought that 8-year-olds were, on the whole, more perceptive than the world gave them credit for. Lauren arrived at 7:55 with her boyfriend Derek, who was very large and very quiet, and turned out to be extraordinarily useful because he could carry a dresser by himself while holding a conversation about basketball. Lauren was small and loud and greeted Ethan with the frank assessment of someone who had been hearing about him for 2 months and had opinions. You're taller than I expected, she said. Lily said you were tall, but I thought she was overcompensating. Overcompensating for what? For how much she likes you. She said it without embarrassment or apology, took her coffee, and went to argue with Lily about which boxes to take down first. Ethan looked at Lily across the room. She had heard every word. Her apartment was too small for anything not to be heard. And she was looking at Lauren with the expression of someone who had made a significant error in inviting this person to be present on moving day. She caught Ethan's eye and made a face that said, I'm sorry, and this is who she is simultaneously. He smiled. She shook her head, went back to directing traffic. The move took most of the day. The old apartment was 3 rooms of furniture, 2 kids' worth of accumulated everything, and approximately 400 pounds of books that Lily had apparently been collecting since she was a teenager and could not be persuaded to reduce by a single volume. He carried boxes. Derek carried furniture. Lauren organized with the efficient aggression of someone who had a system and wasn't interested in deviating from it. Lily managed Marcus and Emma and the logistics of what went in which truck, and Sophie stayed with Emma and kept her occupied and out from underfoot, with a patience that made Ethan quietly proud in the specific way that parent pride operates, a warmth in the chest that doesn't always need an outlet. At one point, carrying a stack of boxes down the narrow Wicker Park staircase, he heard Emma's voice from above. She was on the second-floor landing, watching the operation with her pony clutched to her chest, asking Sophie, Is your daddy and my mommy going to get married? He slowed down without stopping. Sophie's answer was thoughtful and immediate. I don't know, maybe. Probably they have to decide that. I want them to, Emma said. Me too, Sophie said. Like it was simple. Like it had already been decided and they were just waiting for the adults to catch up. He kept walking down the stairs. His face was doing something he couldn't fully control, and he was grateful no one was looking at him. The new apartment in Avondale was on the second floor of a 2-flat on a quiet street with large trees that had lost their leaves but still had the structure of something that would be beautiful again in spring. The building was clean and warm, and the super, a middle-aged man named Frank, who answered the door in a Bears sweatshirt, had left a card and a small plant in the entryway. Lily held the plant and looked at it for a moment like she wasn't sure what to do with unexpected small kindnesses. Marcus claimed his room immediately and efficiently, carrying his own boxes up the stairs and arranging his things with the organizational seriousness that characterized everything he did. Emma's room got set up next, because Emma had opinions about where everything went and communicated them at full volume. And Sophie assisted with the focused dedication of someone who had decided this was her project. Ethan and Derek assembled a bed frame in Lily's room while she and Lauren argued in the kitchen about where the dishes went. The argument was entirely friendly and also completely genuine. Lauren had a theory about kitchen organization that Lily had been resisting for years, and moving day had apparently reopened the debate. Does she always, Derek said, gesturing loosely in the direction of Lauren's voice. I have no idea, Ethan said, tightening a bolt. I just met her. She's like this constantly, Derek said, without any particular emotion about it. It's useful, actually. If you let her set up the kitchen, it'll be perfect forever. Does Lily know that? Lily knows. She just likes arguing about it. They finished the bed frame. Ethan stood up and looked at the room, Small, but solid, with a window that faced the backyard and a closet that was a real closet, not the afterthought closet of the Wicker Park apartment. A room that was just hers. At around 4 in the afternoon, the truck was empty, and the new apartment was full, and everyone was sitting on various pieces of furniture eating pizza from 2 large boxes that Ethan had ordered without asking anyone, because it was 4 o'clock and they'd been working since 7:30, and the question of what to eat didn't need to be a discussion. Lauren ate 3 slices in under 10 minutes and announced she had to leave because she and Derek had a thing. And Derek looked at Ethan with an expression of mild resignation and said it was good to meet him, and they left. Marcus disappeared into his room immediately after eating, the way he always disappeared when the social portion of any event exceeded his capacity, which was something Ethan recognized in himself at that age. Emma fell asleep on the couch mid-slice, still holding her pony, and Sophie sat next to her watching something on Lily's phone with the volume low. Ethan and Lily stood in the kitchen. The pizza boxes were on the counter and there were cups everywhere, and the kitchen wasn't set up the way it would eventually be set up, but it was warm and it smelled like cardboard and dinner, and it was theirs. Hers. "You okay?" he said. "Yeah." She leaned against the counter. Her hair had come half out of its tie over the course of the day, and she had a smudge of something on her left cheekbone, and she looked more tired than he'd seen her in weeks. "Yeah, I'm good." "You don't have to be good. It's been a long day." "It has." She looked around the kitchen. "It's nice, isn't it? The apartment." "It's really nice." "The closet in my room is—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. He waited because he'd learned that sometimes Lily stopped before the thing she actually wanted to say and needed a moment to decide whether to say it. "It's a real closet," she said finally, "not just a curtain rod in a corner." "I saw. I had a curtain rod in a corner for 1.5 years." She set it to the kitchen counter. "I kept my clothes in a curtain rod in a corner of my living room, and I kept telling myself it was temporary, and I—" She stopped again, breathed out through her nose. He didn't move toward her. He stayed where he was across the small kitchen and let her have the feeling. "I should have done this sooner," she said. "I kept telling myself I couldn't afford to move when really I was just afraid to try. And then you made one phone call and—" She shook her head. "You made the decision," he said. "You signed the lease. You did the hard part." The hard part was believing I was allowed to want better. She said it simply, looking at him now. "That sounds dramatic." "It doesn't sound dramatic at all." She held his gaze. "Thank you for today, for being here." She paused. "I know you have things. I don't have things," he said. "I had today. I spent it here." She looked at him for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. From the living room came the low sound of whatever Sophie was watching on the phone. Down the hall, Marcus's door was closed and quiet. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "You can always tell me something. I've been trying to figure out what you are to me." She said it directly, which was how she said everything that mattered. "What this is. I've been avoiding the question because every time I get close to it, She made a gesture he recognized, the one that meant the sentence goes somewhere I'm not ready to go yet. "You don't have to name it," he said. "I know I don't have to." She looked at him steadily. "But I think I want to. She exhaled. "I need you to know that when I say something like this, I'm not saying it lightly. I don't say things lightly." "I know. You're important to me," she said. "That's the thing. She pressed her hand flat on the counter. "You showed up today with coffee and donuts, and you carried boxes all day, and you put together a bed frame, and you didn't try to take over anything that was mine to do. And that is—" She stopped. Her voice had shifted slightly. Not broken, just different. "That is a harder thing to do than most people understand." "It's not that hard." "It is," she said, "because your instinct is to fix things. I can see it. Every time something comes up, you have the answer ready, and you make yourself hold it back. That takes effort." She paused. "I see the effort, Ethan. I'm not saying it goes unnoticed." He looked at her, at the kitchen, at the life she'd moved into this apartment, all the pieces of it stacked and arranged and beginning to settle into something that would become ordinary and good. "I'm not good at being—" he started. Stopped. "At being known," he said. "I've managed it by keeping most people at a specific distance where they can't see enough to see the wrong things." "And me?" You're already past that distance. He said it plainly. You've been past it for a while. She didn't look away. Does that scare you? Completely. Me too. She looked at the counter, then up at him. I think we should stop pretending it doesn't. I think so too. Something settled between them. Not resolution. There was no clean resolution to something this complicated, but a kind of arrival. The specific sensation of two people agreeing to stop managing the distance between them and see what happened when they didn't. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, and she turned to face him, and he put his hand against her face. Not a dramatic gesture, just his hand against her cheek, the smudge of whatever it was under his thumb. And she put her hand over his, and they stood there in her new kitchen on moving day and just breathed for a moment. When he finally kissed her, it was unhurried. Not the movie's version of a first kiss, with its perfect lighting and strategic timing. More like two people who had been moving towards something for weeks finally arriving there and finding it was exactly as solid as they'd hoped. From the living room, Sophie's voice, "Emma, don't eat the pizza crust off the floor. We talked about this." They pulled back from each other. Lily pressed her hand to her mouth, not to hide a smile. The smile was already visible, but more in the way of someone containing something too large for the room. "Your daughter," she said. "She's thorough. She's wonderful." He looked at her. Her hand was still over his against her face, and she hadn't moved to put distance between them, and the kitchen was warm and the day was done, and they were still standing there, which was the whole thing, really. "I want to do this properly," he said. "What does properly mean?" He searched for it. "I don't want to be a secret or a Thursday arrangement. I want the kids to know. I want the people in my life to know about you. He stopped. "Say it," she said. "I want it to be real," he said. "Not cautious. Real." She held his gaze for a long moment. "That's a big ask." "I know. I have 2 kids, Ethan. Real means they're part of it." "I know. I want them to be part of it." She was quiet. He let her be quiet. Outside the kitchen window, the December sky had gone dark in the early way of winter evenings, and the streetlights were on, and the city was doing its indifferent thing around them. "Okay," she said. Not easily. Nothing with Lily was easy in the performed sense, but genuinely, with her eyes open. "Okay. Real." The weeks between that Saturday and Christmas had a different quality than the ones before. Something that had been holding its breath let it out. They stopped being careful in the way they'd been careful. Not reckless. Not without thought, but with less of the deliberate management that comes from two people trying to protect themselves from each other. When Ethan came to the Avondale apartment now, which was increasingly often, he came in the way people come into spaces that are beginning to feel familiar. He knew where the good coffee cups were, the 2 without chips on the second shelf. He knew that Marcus needed quiet after school for approximately 45 minutes before he was ready to interact with anyone. He knew that Emma's current favorite color changed every few days, and that agreeing with whatever she said it currently was would earn immediate and total trust. He brought Sophie on weekends when the schedules aligned, which they were beginning to align more often because Sophie had developed a strong relationship with Emma, and a more complex but equally real relationship with Marcus. Sophie and Marcus had almost nothing in common on the surface. Sophie was an extrovert who processed everything aloud. Marcus was internal and operated mostly in silences, but they'd found a specific understanding in their shared experience of being the older sibling to a 5-year-old chaos agent. They talked about it sometimes, just the 2 of them, in the low, serious tones of veterans comparing notes. Ethan watched this happening. He tried not to think too far ahead about what it meant because thinking too far ahead was how he made himself afraid of things that hadn't happened yet. But sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary moment, Sophie helping Marcus look something up for a school project, Emma showing Lily a drawing that was also being shown to Ethan as though it required 2 opinions, all of them in Lily's warm kitchen on a cold December evening. He couldn't help it. The future was visible in those moments, and it wasn't abstract. He wanted it. The trouble came on a Tuesday. He didn't see it coming because it came from the direction he'd stopped watching. He had an assistant named James, who'd been with the company 3 years and who he liked, and James told him on a Tuesday morning at 9:15 that a reporter from a Chicago financial magazine had called asking for a comment. The story, James said carefully, was about Ethan's personal life. Specifically, the reporter had been tipped off, James didn't know by whom, that Ethan Carter was, as the reporter had apparently phrased it, romantically involved with a working-class single mother from Wicker Park. Ethan looked at James for a moment. "They want a comment by Thursday," James said. "Tell them no comment." "That's what I said. She said she'd run the story either way and asked if there was anything we wanted on the record." He kept his face neutral, which was automatic, but underneath it something had tightened. Not because of himself, because of Lily. He'd been in the public eye long enough to understand how this particular machine worked. He'd had his name in financial press since his first company, and occasionally in the broader tech press, and once in a profile in a national magazine that he'd consented to and immediately regretted because it used the word visionary 4 times and made him sound like someone who would say the word visionary without irony. He knew what it felt like to be written about, and more importantly, he knew what it felt like to be a story that someone else was controlling. Lily didn't know any of that. She'd been living in a city where she was nobody in particular, where her name didn't appear in any publication, where her life was hers in the way that most people's lives are theirs. Entirely private, not because of any arrangement, but because no one had decided it was interesting yet. He called her at 9:30. "Hey," she said. She was between shifts, he knew. Dental office was done. She had 2 hours before she needed to be at the hotel for a banquet event. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Is everything okay?" "Everyone's fine, but—" He said it plainly, the way she'd taught him by example. Just say the thing. He explained the call, the reporter, the story, what James had said. She was quiet for a moment. "She knows my name?" Lily said. "Apparently, I don't know how much she knows." "How is that possible?" "Probably someone who saw us together somewhere, or knows someone who did." He paused. "I'm sorry, I should have—" "Don't apologize for existing in public," she said, but her voice had gone flat in the way it went when she was processing something that had hit harder than she was going to admit immediately. "What happens if she runs it?" "It would be a small piece. Financial magazine, not front-page news. My name gets mentioned in a context like this, and it generates a day of attention, maybe 2, and then it's gone." "And my name?" He paused. "Probably." The silence lasted about 5 seconds, which was longer than most of her silences. "I'm a front desk receptionist," she said. "I work banquet events on weekends. I don't—" She stopped. "My kids, Ethan. If my name is in an article about you—" "I know. Emma's 5. She doesn't need—" She stopped again. He could hear her breathing. "I've already put a call into my attorney," he said. "She's looking at what our options are. The reporter may not have enough to make it interesting. It might not run at all. And if it does, then we manage it, together. I'll be transparent about it with you the whole way." She was quiet. "I should have thought about this," he said. "Earlier. When we first started—" "How would you have thought about it? You didn't know when we first started that it was going to be—" She stopped. "That it was going to be what?" he said. A pause. "This," she said. "This much." He let that sit. "I need to think," she said. "Okay. I'm not—" She took a breath. "I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying I need to sit with this for a little bit. Take whatever time you need. Can I call you tonight?" "Yeah, whenever." She called at 9:45 after the banquet shift, and he was still at his desk. He'd canceled his evening plans, which had been a company dinner he'd been avoiding anyway, and he picked up before the second ring. "Okay," she said. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I've thought about it." She sounded tired but clear. "I don't want to make a decision out of fear. I've done that before and it doesn't serve me." "Lily, let me finish." She paused. "I'm scared of the visibility. That's real. I'm a private person and I have kids, and the idea of someone writing a story about my life is—" She made a sound. "It's uncomfortable. A lot." "I understand. But—" She took a breath. "The reason they think it's a story is because of who you are. And I knew who you were when I got in the car and drove to that restaurant. I knew something about this eventually. I just didn't think about it because I was too busy figuring out whether I could trust you." He was quiet. "I trust you," she said. "That took me a long time to be able to say, but I'm saying it." A pause. So handle the reporter thing. Do whatever your lawyer says and tell me what's happening as it happens. I will. Always. And Ethan? Yeah. Next time there's something I need to know about your world, anything, tell me before it becomes a situation. You have my word, she exhaled. Okay? Okay. A pause. I'm going to sleep. I'm exhausted. Get some rest. Hey. Her voice was quieter now. The sharp edges of the conversation had rounded off. Are you okay? You've been holding this all day. He looked at his office, dark except for the desk lamp, the city outside the window doing its glittering nighttime thing. I'm okay. I was worried about you. I'm tougher than I look. I know, he said. I've known that since the first night. She was quiet for a moment. Good night, Ethan. Good night. The reporter ran a short item 2 days later. 4 paragraphs. His name, the word seen with, a vague description. No name for Lily, because apparently the reporter genuinely hadn't confirmed one. It generated a handful of comments on the magazine's website, and one mention in a gossip column that linked back to it, and by the following Monday, it had entirely dissolved into the general noise of things people stopped caring about. Lily texted him when she saw it. 4 paragraphs. You told me it would be 2 days of attention. He texted back. I may have been conservative. A vague description. She didn't know my name. My attorney put a call in. I think it helped. A long pause, then, thank you for that. You thanked me for making a phone call. Again, I'm going to keep thanking you for things. Get used to it. He looked at that message for a long moment. Outside his office window, Chicago was doing its January thing, gray and cold and completely committed to it. And Christmas had come and gone, and the New Year had arrived, and he and Lily and 4 children between them had spent Christmas Eve together for the first time. All of them at the Avondale apartment with a tree Emma had decorated with maximum enthusiasm and minimum spatial awareness, and food that was too much of everything, because Lily cooked the way she did most things, completely and without reservation. Sophie had given Marcus a book about soccer strategy that she'd picked out herself after 2 weeks of research he'd had no idea she was conducting. Marcus had received it with the contained pleasure of someone who didn't show things on the surface, but he'd been reading it before they left that night, and he'd brought it to the couch and sat near Sophie, not next to her but near her, in the easy proximity of people who don't need to announce that they're comfortable. Emma had fallen asleep under the Christmas tree in the way of very young children who simply stop and go horizontal wherever they are, still holding her pony, and Lily had looked at her and then looked at Ethan, and something in her face had gone soft and unguarded in a way he'd only seen a handful of times. The expression she had when she'd stopped performing everything and was just there, fully there, not managing the distance between herself and the moment. He'd reached over and taken her hand. She'd let him keep it for the rest of the evening. Get used to it, she'd written. He thought he probably could. January in Chicago is not a month that asks anything politely. It arrives without ceremony, and it stays without apology. And the cold it brings is the specific kind that doesn't just sit on the surface of things but gets inside them, into the joints of buildings, into the spaces between people's coats and their skin, into the particular quiet of very early mornings when the city is still running but running slower, like something trying to conserve heat. Lily had always found January clarifying, not pleasant, clarifying. The way extreme cold has a way of stripping things down to what they actually are, removing the ambient noise of better weather and forcing a kind of honesty that spring and summer let you avoid. You found out in January which friendships were real, which habits were sustainable, which version of yourself held up when the conditions weren't favorable. She found out in January that Ethan Carter held up. This was not a small thing. She had trained herself, over the course of several years and several specific disappointments, to be cautious about what she allowed herself to rely on. Not cynical. She'd worked hard not to become cynical because cynicism was a luxury that required no children depending on you to still believe things were possible. But careful. She'd been very careful. Ethan was still there in January, and he was still the same person he'd been in October, and that sounds like a low bar until you've spent enough time watching people become different people the moment the weather changes, or the novelty wears off, or the reality of your life in its full, unfiltered version settles around them like a weight they hadn't agreed to carry. He carried it. without complaint and without making her feel the weight of his carrying it, which was the harder thing. There were still problems. That was the part no one talks about when they talk about love working out. The fact that working out doesn't mean the problems stop. It means you have someone standing next to you while you deal with them, and that changes the nature of dealing with them without making them disappear. The problem in January was Ryan. Ryan was Marcus and Emma's father, and he was not a bad person. Lily had always been clear about that, to herself and to anyone who asked, including Ethan. He was someone who had wanted a life and then encountered the actual shape of that life and discovered it didn't match the version he'd been imagining. And instead of doing the hard work of reconciling those two things, he'd left. He checked in intermittently. He paid support that was less than he was supposed to pay more often than he paid the correct amount. He showed up when he wanted to and didn't when he didn't. And Marcus had learned to calibrate his expectations accordingly, and Emma was still in the process of learning, and the learning was not painless. What happened in January was that Ryan called Lily on a Wednesday evening to tell her he was moving to Phoenix. Not because of a job, not because of a family situation, because he'd met someone and she lived in Phoenix and he was going. Lily stood in her kitchen in Avondale and held the phone and listened to Ryan explain himself for 4 minutes, and then she said, in the measured voice she used when she was managing something that needed to be managed, "When are you leaving?" "End of the month." "Have you told Marcus?" A pause. "I was hoping you could." "No," she said, flat and final. "He's your son. You tell him." She hung up, stood at the counter, looked at the plant Frank the super had left in the entryway, which she'd moved to the kitchen windowsill and which had, against the odds, survived January. She texted Ethan, "Ryan is moving to Phoenix. I need like 30 minutes before I can talk." He replied, "Take whatever you need. I'm here." She took 45 minutes, sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet room with the real closet, and let herself feel the complicated thing. Not grief for Ryan, not anymore, that had burned off years ago. But grief for Marcus, who was going to have to recalibrate his expectations again, and for Emma, who was going to ask where Daddy went with the specific 4-syllable open-faced confusion of a child who doesn't have the architecture yet to hold that kind of information. Then she picked up the phone and called Ethan. She told him everything. He listened to all of it, and when she was done, he said, "How are you?" "I'm angry," she said. "At him, for doing this the way he's doing it, for making me the one who has to—" She stopped. "I'm always the one who has to manage the aftermath of his choices. That's not fair." "No, it's not," she breathed. "But it's true. What do you need right now?" "I don't need anything right now. I need Marcus to be okay. And I don't control that." He was quiet for a moment. "Marcus is a tough kid." "He is," she said. "He's also 8, and his dad is moving 2,000 miles away for a woman he met 6 months ago. Do you want me to come over?" She almost said no. The automatic no, the reflexive management of space and need, and how much she was willing to accept from anyone on a given night. She caught herself before it came out. "Yeah," she said. "Can you?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 17. He came up the stairs with a paper bag from a bakery near his apartment that was inexplicably still open at 9:30 on a Wednesday. And inside the bag were 2 slices of lemon cake and 1 chocolate chip cookie that he gave to her without explanation, and she ate without asking. They sat at the kitchen table and she talked and he listened, and at a certain point she wasn't talking about Ryan anymore, but about Marcus and who he was and how much she needed him to be okay and how terrifying it was, specifically, to love a child that completely, to have that much of yourself walking around outside your body in the form of another person who you couldn't fully protect. "I know," Ethan said. He said it quietly, without elaboration, and she understood that he did know. That Sophie was that for him, that same terrifying completeness. And something about that understanding, the simple fact of being known in it, made the whole thing slightly more bearable. Ryan told Marcus on a Friday. Lily was in the apartment when it happened. She'd asked Ryan to come in person, and he had, which she gave him credit for. She stayed in the kitchen while they talked in Marcus's room. She didn't hear the words, but she heard the quality of the silence afterward, and then she heard Marcus's voice, single and flat. "Okay." And then nothing for a while. Ryan came out of the room looking the way people look when they've done something they know is insufficient and don't have a way to make it sufficient and are trying not to show that they know. He said goodbye to Lily in the hallway, and she walked him to the door, and she said, "Call him, even from Phoenix, especially from Phoenix." "I will," Ryan said. She didn't say what she was thinking, which was that she'd been told this before and had learned not to weight it heavily. She just nodded and closed the door. She went to Marcus's room, knocked. He said, "Come in," and she came in and sat on the edge of his bed, and he was at his desk with his back to her, looking at his soccer trophy from last season on the shelf above the desk. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah." A pause. "Why does he always—" He stopped. "You can say it." He turned around. His face was the controlled face, the one that didn't show things on the surface, but his eyes were something else. "Why does he always choose something else?" She held his gaze. She did not look away, and she did not fill the space with something easy. "I don't know," she said. "That's his problem. It's not about you." "I know." He said it in the way kids say "I know" when they know the right answer but can't make themselves feel it yet. "It's allowed to hurt anyway," she said. He looked at his trophy, back at her. "Is Ethan going to move somewhere?" The question hit her in the chest. She steadied herself. "No," she said. "How do you know?" "Because he's not your dad," she said. "He's different." Marcus considered this for a long moment with the particular gravity he brought to everything. "Dr. Okonkwo says I should let people show me who they are over time instead of deciding at the beginning." "Dr. Okonkwo is right. Ethan's been showing me for a while." "He has," she said. Marcus turned back to his desk, picked up a pencil, put it down. "Okay," he said, in the same tone as when he'd said it to Ryan, but different. This one had something underneath it. Not resolution, but the beginning of one. She left him to it, closed the door softly. In the living room, Emma was on the floor drawing, oblivious and complete in the way of 5-year-olds who process things at their own schedule and on their own timeline and would ask about Daddy again when she was ready and not before. Lily sat on the couch and looked at her daughter drawing horses, because Sophie had taught Emma to draw horses, which had become Emma's primary artistic subject over the past 2 months, and let herself just sit there for a minute. She texted Ethan, "He's okay. He will be okay." The reply came back, "I know, so will you." She looked at that for a long time. It was February before things settled into the shape they were going to hold. Not permanently. Nothing held permanently. She'd given up on permanently. But stably. Ryan called Marcus twice from Phoenix, which was twice more than she'd expected in the first month, and Marcus received the calls with the careful neutrality of someone keeping their expectations low enough to manage. Emma asked where Daddy was twice, accepted the answer both times with the adaptable pragmatism of a 5-year-old, and went back to drawing horses. Children's resilience was not the soft, comfortable thing people made it sound like in greeting cards. It was something harder and more practical, a kind of structural flexibility that adults mostly lose and then spend years trying to find again. Ethan met Dr. Okonkwo in February. Not by design. It happened because Marcus's Thursday appointment ran long and Lily was stuck at work and Ethan was already near the neighborhood and offered to wait outside and walk Marcus home. And Dr. Okonkwo came out with Marcus and found Ethan sitting on the bench outside the office building, and Marcus introduced them without ceremony. "This is Ethan. He's my mom's boyfriend." The word boyfriend delivered with the pragmatic simplicity of someone who had decided this was the accurate term and wasn't going to make a production of it. Dr. Okonkwo, a compact Ghanaian-American man in his 50s with a gray-streaked beard and the specific patient quality of someone who listened for a living, had shaken Ethan's hand and looked at him for a moment and said, "Marcus speaks well of you." Ethan had looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at the sidewalk with the air of someone who had not expected this information to be shared and was making peace with it. "He's never told me that," Ethan said. "He wouldn't," Dr. Okonkwo said, "but he does." They'd walked home, Ethan and Marcus, 3 blocks through the cold February afternoon. Marcus had his hands in his pockets and his soccer bag over one shoulder, and he walked the way he did everything, with forward intention, not looking around much. Halfway home he said, "You're not going to tell my mom what Dr. Okonkwo said." "Why not?" Because she'll make it into a whole thing. Fair. Ethan kept walking. I won't tell her. Marcus nodded. A block of silence. Then, do you actually like soccer, or do you just watch it because of me? I didn't know anything about soccer before your games. Now I know something. What do you know? I know you should pass more in the second half when the defense tightens. Marcus looked at him sideways. That's what my coach says. Your coach is right. I know. He pulled his bag higher on his shoulder. I've been working on it. I know. I saw it the last game. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in a voice that was trying to be casual and was almost succeeding, Are you going to be around for the spring season? The question had all of his father's absence in it. Every casual question Marcus asked about the future had that weight in it. The specific gravity of a child who had learned that future plans were provisional and had started asking about them sideways, in ways that let him pretend he wasn't asking. Ethan stopped walking. Marcus stopped too, looked up at him. Yes, Ethan said. Not hedged. Not I plan to or I hope to. Just yes. Marcus held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded, once, the same nod he'd given his mother on the soccer field bleachers months ago. The nod that meant the information had been received and filed and he was done discussing it. They walked the rest of the way home in the comfortable silence of two people who had said what needed to be said. Lily was there when they got back, coat still on, just arrived. She looked at them both coming through the door and read something in the air between them. She was always reading things. It was one of her most relentless qualities. But she didn't ask. She just looked at Ethan, and he looked at her, and whatever passed between them didn't need words. Marcus went to his room. Emma came out of her room immediately to show Ethan her latest horse drawing, which had improved considerably and now had 4 legs of roughly equal length, which she announced with great pride. He studied it with appropriate seriousness and told her the tale was particularly realistic. She beamed and took the drawing back and went to add more details. Lily came into the kitchen where Ethan was hanging up his coat and said quietly, "Thank you for getting him." "He's easy company," Ethan said, using her words back to her, the ones she'd said about Sophie on that first Wednesday they were together. She recognized them. Her face did the thing, the soft, unguarded thing that she still couldn't entirely control after all these months, when something caught her off guard in a good way. "Stop," she said. "I'm just saying. You're being very—" She searched for the word. "Nice?" he offered. She laughed. A real one. And the apartment was warm around them, and Marcus was behind his closed door, and Emma was adding details to her horse drawing, and outside the window, February was making its cold gray case for patience, and the whole thing was ordinary and imperfect and completely real. It was the first weekend of March when Ethan brought Sophie to the Avondale apartment, and the 4 of them, Sophie, Marcus, Emma, and a stuffed rabbit named Gerald that Emma insisted on including, spent the afternoon at the park 2 blocks down, the one with the decent playground and the field that was starting to show the first uncertain suggestions of green. Sophie pushed Emma on the swings. Marcus kicked a soccer ball against the park fence with the focused repetition of someone building a skill. Ethan and Lily sat on a bench with their coffee and paper cups and watched all of it happening around them. "She's so good with her," Lily said, watching Sophie catch Emma at the bottom of the slide. "Sophie's been an only child for 7 years. I think she's been waiting for this without knowing she was waiting for it." Lily looked at him. "Are you happy?" The question was simple and direct, the way her questions always were, and it deserved a simple, direct answer. He thought about it anyway, because she'd also taught him that thinking before answering was not the same as stalling. "Yeah," he said, "I am." "Even with all of it? The logistics, the schedules, the—" "Lily," he looked at her. "Yes, even with all of it." She held his gaze. "I keep waiting for you to get tired." "I know you do. It's not an accusation." "I know it's not." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "You're allowed to keep checking. I'd rather you check and confirm than stop checking and worry in silence." She looked at the park, at Sophie, who was now teaching Emma to pump her legs on the swings with the patient instruction of someone who had been waiting for an opportunity to teach something. At Marcus, who had stopped kicking the ball and was watching his sister with an expression that was, for Marcus, something close to open. "Can I tell you something I haven't told you yet?" she said. Yeah, she kept her eyes on the park. When I was 23 before Marcus, I had a version of my life in my head, the version I was working toward. She paused. Career, stability, someone to build things with, the whole outline. What happened to it? Life. She said it without bitterness, just as a fact. Things didn't work out the way I planned, and I spent a long time grieving the outline, like I'd lost something that had actually existed when really it was just a plan. She paused. And then I had Marcus, and then Emma, and I stopped grieving the outline because I didn't have time, and also because... She stopped. Because? Because the actual thing was better than the outline, even when it was so much harder. She looked at him now. I'm saying that because I think I needed to say it out loud. I think I've been carrying that quietly for a while. He held her gaze. The actual thing is better than the outline, he said. Yeah. She looked back at the park. It really is. He reached over and took her hand the way he'd taken it on Christmas Eve, the way that had started as tentative and had become simply how they were. And she didn't move away, and she didn't manage the gesture. She just let it be what it was. Emma had figured out the pumping motion and was now swinging herself, legs going with determined enthusiasm, face lit up with the specific joy of a child who has just learned to do something independently. She was yelling about it. Mommy, I'm doing it, look! I see you, Lily called back. You're doing great. Marcus retrieved his soccer ball and came to stand near the bench, not asking to sit down, but close enough to be in the conversation if there was one. After a moment, he said, It's getting warmer. Spring's coming, Ethan said. Good. He bounced the ball once on the ground. The ground's better for practice when it's not frozen. Makes sense. Marcus looked at Sophie and Emma. Sophie told Emma that if she practices pumping every time we come to the park, she'll be able to swing over the bar by summer. That's physically impossible, Ethan said. I know, I told her. A pause. Emma doesn't know. Emma will figure it out. Sophie will tell her before then. Marcus bounced the ball again. Sophie is honest. She is, Ethan agreed. It's a good quality, Marcus said, with the tone of someone delivering a considered opinion. Then he went back to the fence and his practice, leaving the sentence where he'd put it. Lily squeezed Ethan's hand once. He squeezed back. They sat with their coffee going cold, and the March wind moving through the park, and all four children existing in the various ways they existed, loud and physical and internal and thorough. And the afternoon did what afternoons do when you're not trying to make them into anything. It just moved forward at its own pace and let you be in it. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening, Ethan sat at his kitchen island after Sophie had gone to bed and looked at a box he'd taken from his closet shelf. Not a large box. Small, actually, the size of something that contained something small and significant. He'd had it for 2 weeks. He'd taken it out and put it back 3 times. He was not a man who acted without thinking. This had served him well in business and in life, and occasionally it had cost him things he would have moved faster on if he'd trusted himself more. He was aware of this. He'd become more aware of it over the past several months in the specific way that proximity to certain people illuminates your own patterns. He opened the box, looked at what was inside, thought about Lily in her kitchen with the lemon cake he'd brought on a Wednesday night. Lily at the park, telling him the actual thing was better than the outline. Lily's face when Marcus told Dr. Okonkwo he spoke well of someone, and Ethan had kept that quiet because Marcus had asked him to. He wasn't afraid of the decision. He'd made it some time ago without realizing he was making it. The way the real decisions happen, not in single moments of clarity, but in the gradual accumulation of choices that point the same direction until the direction is simply where you are. What he wanted to do, it right. Not perfectly. He'd given up on perfect, but right. In a way that honored what they'd actually built rather than performing some version of what it was supposed to look like. He closed the box, put it back on the shelf. Not yet, but soon. He sat with that for a while, comfortable in the waiting, which was new. He'd spent most of his life managing the uncertainty out of things. The waiting was a different kind of certainty, the kind that comes not from controlling outcomes, but from knowing what you want them to be. He thought about what Sophie had said in Palazzo's Pizza back in November when Lily had told her they were friends. He needs someone to like him. He works too much. delivered with the flat authority of a 7-year-old who saw things clearly because she hadn't yet learned the reasons to look away. He thought about Marcus at the soccer field in October. Are you going to disappear? And his own answer? No. And Marcus's response, just the single nod, which had required more trust than the question had. The trust of someone deciding to believe an answer they'd been given before and had been wrong to believe. He thought about Emma, who had put her head against his arm on a bleacher like he was furniture, the most instinctive and therefore most honest assessment available. Emma, who drew horses now because of Sophie, whose worldview still operated on the assumption that people showed up. He thought about Lily in her bathroom the second morning, sitting on the edge of her tub with the door locked. I'm 30 years old and I'm tired of being terrified of everything. They were all of them still a little terrified. He thought that was probably true forever, for everyone who was paying attention. The fear didn't go away. You just got better at choosing which side of it to stand on. He picked up his phone, texted Lily. You still awake? The reply came back in 2 minutes. Barely. Emma fought bedtime for 45 minutes. She had opinions about her pajamas. Did you resolve them? We reached a compromise. She's wearing the pony pajamas, which are summer weight, but she's under 3 blankets, so we're calling it a win. He smiled. Can I ask you something? You can always ask me something. He held the phone for a moment, then typed, Are you happy? Her answer took longer than he expected. He sat with the weight, not afraid of it. Then, yes. More than I've been in a long time, maybe more than I thought I was allowed to be. He looked at that last sentence for a while. More than I thought I was allowed to be. The most honest thing and the most heartbreaking, and also, because of what had happened between October and March, because of everything she'd let herself reach for, the most hopeful. He typed back, You're allowed. A pause. Then, I know. I'm figuring that out. Take your time. I am. And then, Good night, Ethan. Good night. He put the phone down, looked at the kitchen, looked at the apartment that had felt emptier than it should for 4 years. That was not empty in the same way now, that had in it Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator and a lopsided ashtray on his desk, and increasingly, evidence of a life that was getting larger rather than contracting. He looked at the shelf in the hallway where he'd put the box back. Soon, he thought, but the wanting of it was already settled, had been settled for a while, was simply waiting for the right moment to move from private to said out loud, from held to offered. The thing about love, the real version of it, not the outline, is that it doesn't announce itself with drama. It arrives in a dental office receptionist on a red line train who shows up 2 minutes late and apologizes for it. It arrives in a kid in a parking lot who asks direct questions and gives single nods. It arrives in the specific way someone holds their coffee cup when they're telling you something true. It lives in granola bars and cold soccer fields and box assembly and small bedrooms and moving days and lemon cake brought at 9:30 on a Wednesday because someone made a phone call and was worried. It doesn't look the way anyone imagines it will look. It looks like ordinary Tuesday evenings and difficult conversations held to completion, and 2 people standing in a kitchen on moving day deciding to stop pretending the distance between them isn't already gone. It looks like choosing to stay, over and over, in all the ordinary moments that make up a life, until staying isn't a choice anymore because it's simply what you are. Present, there, the person who showed up and kept showing up until everyone stopped being surprised by it. Ethan Carter had spent 4 years protecting himself from the very thing that turned out to be the only thing worth not protecting himself from. That's not wisdom he could have arrived at faster. Some things have to be arrived at slowly, earned through the specific patience of living through what it costs to get there. Lily Harper had spent years building the structures that kept her functional and whole and able to care for the people she loved. And those structures were real and earned, and she didn't take them down carelessly. She took them down deliberately, one piece at a time, with her eyes open, because she'd decided that the risk of trusting someone was worth what it might become. She was right. That's the part that's easy to miss in the middle of it, when you can't see past the fear to the thing on the other side. She was right to risk it. Not because it worked out, but because the alternatives saw the sealed-off version, the protected version, was a smaller life than the one she deserved. In Avondale, 3 blankets over a 5-year-old in summer-weight pony pajamas, Lily set her phone on her nightstand and lay in the dark of her room, her real room, with the real closet that was hers. and let herself feel the full quiet weight of being okay. Not a perfect okay, not a finished okay. An okay that had Marcus behind his door and Emma under her blankets and a life that was genuinely hers and a man who had shown up at a soccer field and a moving day and a Wednesday night with lemon cake, who had made a promise on a sidewalk and kept it, who had told her 8-year-old son yes in a tone that meant it. The radiator ticked. The city was outside doing what it always did, indifferent and enormous. The plant on the kitchen windowsill was still alive, which still surprised her a little every morning, and the first week of spring had started warming the ground just enough to make it possible to believe in what came next. She thought about the question she'd asked at the park. Are you happy? She'd asked it to Ethan, but in the dark, alone, she let herself answer it too. Yeah, she thought. Yeah, I am. And for the first time in a very long time, she said it without qualifying it, without the asterisk, without the considering everything or the in spite of or the careful management of how much hope she was allowing herself to carry. Just, yeah, just that. The radiator ticked. Outside, Chicago was going about its business under the first warm breath of something new. And in 2 different apartments in the same city, 2 people who had both spent years becoming very good at being alone were slowly, imperfectly, and with their eyes open, learning to be otherwise. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing.